if you can change your story, you can change your world, because words are worlds. By producing content and millions of words online, we changed an industry. We started an industry that didn't exist beforehand. We created something out of nothing from our words. Okay? AI can always give you these whats, but that engagement of the story, right, of the founder sharing their passion is our origin story, how this all came about. We all sell ourselves stories. You think about every single one of your top superheroes, right? We love their origin stories. Why was Superman such a powerful character? It wasn't completely perfect. It didn't live always by his core and his values. Had a weakness, had a quirk. His vulnerability that he was this shy, awkward guy is Clark Kent, right? That's what makes a great brand today as well.
Hello, everybody. It's Fernando Lavata once again in another episode of the Vibrant Genius podcast. I'm here with OG digital marketer Brian Eisenberg, who is the other half of the Eisenberg Brothers. Together, him and Jeffrey have written, I think, 10 or 11 books. They've coined the terms that most digital marketers are familiar with and probably use every day, such as CRO, conversion rate optimization, persuasion architecture, scent, personas. If they didn't coin it, they popularized it in their books, in their writing, in their talks, in their work with, large and small companies. And they live here in Austin, Texas, Round Rock, Texas. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing well. Just got off of doing 2 podcasts myself this morning, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're podcasting a lot these days. So yeah, that's fantastic. So I just wanted to get right into it here. You recently published and released and published a book called "I Think I Swallowed an Elephant: The Stories We Sell, the Success We Build." One of the stories, and you're going to do a workshop based on the book, and one of the stories you're going to include is my story, actually, and about how you helped me tell a better story, right? And I'll tell it from my point of view, and then I want you to tell it from your point of view, and then I want you to kind of give everybody the gist of what this is all about. But we were sitting at a coffee shop here in Round Rock, and you were kind of looking out into the distance. I was telling you about what I was doing, and there's kind of like this dilemma as to what direction to go in. And then you got really quiet, and you just kind of started. I think you maybe unfocused your eyes and gazed out into the horizon, and then you looked at me and you said, "Viral genius," and I'm like, "What? What's he talking about?" You said, "Viral genius. You're what you're doing is the viral genius." And then we started talking about it a little bit more, and you talked about how each founder, so because my service is helping extract founder stories as part of a founder-led marketing play aided by AI to sort of amplify their voice. But you said each founder has their zone of genius, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing is I'm just extracting that genius and viralizing it, not going viral just to go viral, but spreading their ideas out there into the zeitgeist. So, maybe if you want to tell your side of it and talk about the principles behind this and the book.
Yeah, well, I think you missed even more of the backstory, because, let's start with where you were at when we met, right? Which I only found out afterwards, right? You were very much struggling. You were going out there telling people that you were doing the AI organic content cascade, and they were probably looking at you with eyes glazed over.
Yeah, they were looking at me like, what?
Yeah, because it was a mouthful, right? It didn't really process in the brain. Like, people could understand each of the words, but it didn't land as something concrete for them, right? And I think, we're living in a world where there's so much noise that if you can't cut through with clarity and impact, they're just going to ignore you, even with AI, right? And I think, understanding, how you got there, and even your reservations behind the name at first.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's an important part that, you weren't sure about it. And I'd love to explore that so that people understand that as well.
Yeah. So I was, I'd figured out just from my own experience, I kind of happened into this whole AI amplification thing, because what I did last year was I organized a virtual summit for a client of mine. It's a 3-day virtual summit. We had 16 speakers, about 16. Anyway, we had close to 16 speakers. We had a bunch of speakers every day, and we had to fill it up, right? So I didn't want to disappoint my client.
And you had no email list to start with.
We had zero database. we had some followers on LinkedIn for my client. And so what I did was I interviewed my client. I said, you know what, the only thing I can do is to interview my client and then interview the speakers. And I basically turned those into YouTube videos, into short videos. I created LinkedIn posts from the transcript of those things. I used ChatGPT and I used certain prompts to turn them into very conversational posts. And what we did, I basically flooded the airwaves from my client's own LinkedIn, a personal LinkedIn profile, as well as I asked the speakers who are going to be speaking to kind of share their own particular interview out there. And we were able to get like 900 people registered for the summit. You know, at its peak, we had like about 200 people simultaneously logged in at the same time, you know. And so, my client was ecstatic. You know, we were very happy, and we got, now he has a database of 900 people, and it was all because of using AI to sort of create this cascade of content. And so I thought about that, and I said, you know what, this could be used to spread ideas from my clients, especially those who are too busy to create content themselves. They don't have a marketing team, they don't have a CMO, but they can talk, right? They don't have talker's block, and I can interview them and turn that interview into all this cascade. So, but I was still kind of struggling with how to position it and how to sell it and how to, say it in a succinct way. And then when you came up with the Viral Genius framework, I was like, I'm not an expert at going viral on social media. I've never had a viral Instagram or TikTok reel and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's like, and
And,
so
and
I'm
you even were reserved and asking me the question about why genius,
right, right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I was like, who's a genius here? Right. So yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
And so, yeah, I listened to what you were saying, and that's exactly it. Every founder, every entrepreneur, every business owner, they decide to go in business because they see the world slightly differently. They're always an outsider. So they have their own zone of genius, right? And you're just tapping into that by doing great interviews. And here's the kicker to all of this. That's the part that beats AI because it's authentic, real conversations that can't be replicated, real experiences that can't be replicated by AI. AI can always give you these what's, but that engagement of the story, right, of the founder sharing their passion, just the same way you just shared your story, which is, again, one of the most powerful stories we have as business owners, startups, small business, doesn't matter, is our origin story, how this all came about. So you had seen an opportunity on what to do with AI and with you interviewing people. And all I did was say, okay, how do we get through the noise in just a couple of words, right, that have maximum impact? And then as we chatted, we jumped into AI and we created a quick logo because I had multiple ideas behind why those words and how they would work.
Yes.
But more than that, you and I also said, okay, let's take the same concept and plug it into the AIs and see if they could come up with a better name than
Right.
Viral Genius.
Right.
And they couldn't.
Yeah.
Everything they came up with was just another regurgitation. They didn't have that human spark,
Yeah.
right? Again, that's where the magic really happens. They're good at just producing it over and over again, but that human spark is what's unique. And, if anybody looking to the podcast, they can look at the logo. We played on the ratings for a movie, rated VG, right? So, like PG. So everybody knows, okay, it's like content. We get that. So there's an anchor emotionally for people there. And then VG also has anchors for people, who've been in school. Very good, right? So we got to play on all of that. Again, multiple layers of emotional connection that AI can't duplicate. And
Yes.
once you understood that I was talking about the zone of genius, you were good with that. And then you question the virality part, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm chopping it up into pieces that can spread.
Yeah.
But what happened shortly after you bought into that same story? You bought into the fact that now you're doing the Viral Genius framework. What happened for your clients?
I had one client go totally viral. I mean, it was insane. He had hundreds of comments, thousands of likes, about 36 shares for one of his posts. And it was because of the topic that he was talking about, the passion he was talking about. He was controversial. He was contrarian. And the post was the ultimate post was created by AI, but it was created from his own voice,
Yep.
right? And we
And from your own question, extracting that part of his zone of genius.
exactly. And because he's very passionate about a certain topic, and I wanted to make sure that that passion came out, and then I wanted to have a story that he told that kind of put it in stark contrast to what other parts of his story, right? I wanted it to be explicitly stated, and he did do that, and we turned that to a post, and he's had a couple of viral posts. Not everything goes viral. In fact, some, looks like as though nobody's really knows about those posts, but
And but they're all pieces to the ultimate story. Here's the part that, again, right, just I think a lot of people miss the fundamentals that everything that the algorithms are doing. And I'm going to leave the algorithms from Google to ChatGPT to Copilot to all of them. They're all just trying to replicate what the human experience is from a technology point of view. So I was speaking many years ago at a search engine strategies conference, and Ping Jen, who at the time was the head of the quality score team for Microsoft, invited me in to come speak to his team, his group of engineers, because I was explaining this concept of relevance, right, in a very human way that he believed his engineers would replicate. And so that's all the AIs are trying to do, right, is replicate relevance for people. But if you've noticed in the last few years, one of the key things that Google has done is they've come out with their EAT protocol, right, of how they're judging things.
right.
Okay. And so that is part of relevance. But the key one that they've added is experience, right?
Hmm.
Those real experience. And we know our friend Dennis Yu talks about this, right? When you and I got together at that coffee shop, we probably should have filmed. We just finished. We just came up with this name, and we didn't do it, but we can still talk about that
Dennis Yu
experience.
style.
Yeah. But, and again, that's if people are really conscious about doing that. But I think it's really powerful that you and I can still share that story, share that moment. And the engines understand the value of that at this point, and now they can package it for people when they're searching for relevant stories.
Yeah. So I wanted to tie this into your overall concept about the stories we sell, the stories. Wait a minute. The stories we sell, the success we build, and talk about how this kind of fits in with that overall, the topic of your new book, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is, we all sell ourselves stories. We all believe, and for me writing the book, there was twofold, right? There was obviously the 30 plus years of business experience, and I wanted to share it in a much more digestible format so that everybody could take advantage of the knowledge we have, especially with so much noise going on today. These are things that I learned, some of them from my mentor, Roy Williams, who's been doing it for 20 plus years before I did it. This is kind of just wisdom that's passed on and on. And these things work. And so origin stories, we love them. We love them as humans. About the business, obviously, is one example. You think about every single one of your top superheroes, right? We love their origin stories. I share little things about how to build your character or your brand using the same principles that have worked. So why was Superman such a powerful character? He wasn't completely perfect. He didn't live always by his core and his values. He had a weakness. He had a vulnerability. He had a quirk, right? His weakness was kryptonite. Okay, great. His vulnerability that he was this shy, awkward guy is Clark Kent, right? That's what makes a great brand today as well, right? We're not this flawless influencer. And I think in the next few years, based on Roy Williams' book, Pendulum, we are going to see such a revolt coming out from all of these fake AI influencers that are now being produced, these deep fakes, because people want to see the real vulnerability, the real struggles. I mean, I see it when I see you tell your story about how you started all this when you were broke.
Yeah.
And now you're finally hiring your first person. You're speaking on stages about this stuff because it's real and authentic, and we don't have to be perfect. And life sometimes is difficult. And so in the book, I also talk about some of the life difficulty that hit me over the last few years, right? From my brother having health issues to me having health issues and finding my blood sugar was through the roof, even though my story was I was walking 9,000 steps a day. I
Yeah.
was eating plant based food, minimally processed food. I was tracking my fitness. I thought I was relatively okay. I just had put on a few pounds.
Right.
Nope. Blood sugar 376, 12, almost 13. Like, high blood pressure, like all these crazy things. And it was that shock of that moment that I was like, okay, I've got to change my story,
Yeah.
because the story I used to my original weight loss 20 plus years ago, where I lost over 100 pounds, was that I needed to keep up with my kids.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what happens with kids? You know what happens with kids, right? You have another wedding coming up. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
They grow up,
They grow
and you
up.
no longer have to chase up after them. You don't have to be to keep up with them anymore. They're on their own lives. And so that story wasn't working for me anymore.
Hmm.
But when I got that blood test and then I eventually got a continuous glucose monitor and I was able to actually get data on top of that, I realized I needed a new story. I didn't want to be that guy who was on medications for the rest of my life, because I've seen what it's done with my brother and I refused to do that. So I
Hmm.
just had to change my behavior, change my story.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I took that and, like I said, simplified it. There's not a chapter in the book that's over 400 words.
Yeah.
Everything's 250 to 400 words, but it's all based on these simple principles, like I said, that we've used for so long to create great stories, to change even just a couple of words that break through the noise, like the Viral Genius
Yeah.
framework.
I love the book. I mean, it's like, it's one of those books where you can, just read for a brief while. You don't have to kind of keep on, because I'm one of those, I don't like to leave chapters half read,
Yeah,
because
you can't half read in one of these chapters. They're too short.
no, exactly. But you can read, a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 chapters, in a small amount of time and then go do something else. But yeah,
So
so
I've heard a funny story from two different kinds of readers of the book. There is the kind of person who loves the daily reader. They'll take a chapter or two in the morning, they'll read it, they'll contemplate on it. One of my friends will sit and write about it. He'll podcast about that thought, right? That's one type. And the other type is Roy Williams. When he read the book, he said it was very much like a can of Pringles. Said, you eat one, you read one chapter, you grab another, you grab another. By the time you're finished, you realize you finished the whole can
yeah,
of Pringles. And so
exactly.
I've seen people do that with the book as well, because again, it reads so quick that you
Yeah.
can get through it in like 2 hours, or you can take it slowly, take each bite, digest it, however works for you.
And so what was the lesson that the overall lesson you wanted to impart to business owners, and founders? I mean, what was it that you wanted to take away from the book?
I think the number one thing is that if you can change your story, you can change your world, because words are worlds. And again, come back to you. I've been broke. I've been bankrupt. My brother and I have been in terrible shape, right? When we first started our agency back in 1998, before that, we had declared bankruptcy. And by producing content and millions of words online, stuff like that, as you mentioned in the introduction, we changed an industry. We started an industry that didn't exist beforehand. We created something out of nothing from our words. Okay. You've done the same thing just by finding the right words, the right story. You've now turned into a very successful small business, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's about. If I can do that for one more person, and I talk about in the book why I wrote the book. I wasn't going to write another book, but in 2019, I got a little gift box in my post office box with a signed note from Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas, who's coming to Round Rock in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And in there, he wrote a note where he thanked me for writing Be Like Amazon, because it inspired his fans first mentality. But more importantly, he said the "we believe" language is part of his daily vocabulary. The
My
beliefs.
goodness.
That became his story. That became what every single person that comes into the Banana organization, the Fans First organization, the first thing they learn is their beliefs. And that's all you have to start changing with people, is their beliefs, that they have the power to heal. They have the power to go viral. start doing that. And one person, Jesse Colin, is the Savannah Bananas. He sold out stadiums with over 81,000 people in Clemson. He has a waiting list of over 3 million people waiting for tickets. I know people are desperate for the tickets here in Round Rock. It's a much smaller stadium, so I'm excited to see him here. One person has impacted millions. And so I'm hoping, I don't know how many people you'll impact through your viral genius story, right? And having read the book. But if one person can either change their life, change their business because they took these principles and leveraged them, I couldn't be happier.
Well, I wanted to change tack a little bit. Mention some of your original books from back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I talked about this concept and what you and Jeffrey did back in those days in my latest talk I gave at CEX, Content Entrepreneur Expo in Cleveland. Joe Polizzi's deal. Joe with Lulu.com, the print on demand world hybrid publisher. But anyway, and it's about how about coining phrases. It's about owning industry terms, and the term that you mentioned in my initial interview for the book was a term that Roy Williams taught you was he who controls the vocabulary controls the industry. You and Jeffrey, through your books and your newsletters, have coined or popularized several terms, which I mentioned in the introduction. I was wondering if you can kind of maybe walk us through a little bit about that story so that the audience can hear the power of what you did and how that's actually still available to people even today.
It's still available. 100% it's available today. It's just, it's a little bit harder because there's a lot of content out there. So you've got to be a little better at producing stuff. Like, things were a little easier back then when there wasn't as much competition.
Right.
But it all started with Roy Williams. We came across his book, The Wizard of Ads and Secret Formula of the Wizard of Ads, which were New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestsellers on a bookshelf in Barnes and Nobles. And I found them. I read it cover to cover. I gave the book to Jeffrey. He decided we needed to meet with Roy because a lot of the things really resonated with the way we were viewing the world back then. Roy wasn't doing anything really online per se, but he was a radio guy who did a lot of advertising. And so he understood human persuasion and what moves people. And Roy is one of the original long-term content marketers that, again, most people don't know. I actually pulled up a copy of his first self-published book. Most people have never seen this. Does Your Ad Dog Bite? And what's amazing about this is you see this coffee cup called a Monday Morning Memo. He's been writing that now for over 30 years. And he says, if you have a topic, you can, fax this number. I'm actually really curious if this number still works. I'm going to have to test it because I'm curious what happens to it, this 512 number. But he published this little book, and same thing. It was all these little tiny little chapters. Found a publisher found this book, a Bard, and told him he wanted to repackage this because it deserved better.
Yeah.
And Roy used to do this as a voicemail before fax. People used to call in his answering machine every week. He'd have a new message. Okay. This comes from his early radio days. And then eventually he went to fax, and then eventually went to email. And he's done this without fail every Monday for 30 plus years. And if you want to know the impact for that, and you've been down to the Wizard Academy, he's got 31 acres in the hill country of Austin, overlooking, on a cliff here. He's got a free wedding chapel there, because half the property is a free nonprofit that he's created called the Wizard Academy, and the other half is the Williams Marketing, right? His marketing agency. On the free wedding chapel part of the campus, they do over 1,000 weddings a year. People fly all over the world for free to get their wedding done. They've got the Wizard Academy Tower where there's all kinds of classes being done, right? A real non-traditional business school.
It looks like a castle. It looks like an ancient castle.
Yeah, and the architecture and the artwork is extraordinary. He has one of the largest collections of Don Quixote art in the world. I mean, there's so much stuff, and it's like, when you realize he created that because he created the words for pretty much a whole industry, and people in radio just followed him. And then, of course, as we did the internet stuff, we started leveraging some of his stuff. We weren't talking so much about origin stories when we first started, but we were talking about the power of writing and words, and understanding different perspectives and how different people buy. And he would do a lot of the same different perspectives, but from an ad point of view. And so, yeah, it's been incredibly powerful to kind of do that. And of course, one of his quotes is probably one of my favorite quotes. The price of clarity is the risk of insult. And that drives everything we do. It's like sometimes, you have to smack people right in the face with a term like viral genius,
Right.
because it whips you into shape,
Right.
because it's clear and it's impactful. And it might offend some people, and that's okay. But for others, it's crystal clear. And that's who you're looking for as customers.
So the price of clarity is the risk of insult.
Correct.
Right. So then you all bought the book, you met with Roy, and then what happened there? How did that cascade into what you guys did?
So it's a funny story. So when we first met Roy, as we mentioned, we had been in bankruptcy. So we didn't really have a lot of money, but Jeffrey called up his offices, and Corinne, his administrative assistant, told us, yeah, you can meet with Roy. You can speak with him. He does a free Friday morning, once a month. He does a free public seminar here down in Buda, when there was nothing in Buda. Like, there was one traffic light. Now it's a whole different town with an REI, and it's bustling. But there was one traffic light south of Austin in Buda. And so Jeffrey said, okay, we're going to go meet him. I don't know what he's going to do. And, it was a lot of money for us back then because we didn't have any. And we went down, and Roy has since become a great friend and a mentor. And a lot of the internet marketers that people follow today have been down at the academy and have learned from him. And, people like Ryan Dice and so many others.
Right. Right.
Because what we teach there is so unique, right? We really focus in on teaching much more relational marketing than transactional marketing. It's not the quick sell, but it's informing people so they feel more confident in their buying. Probably the biggest thing that changed for our career is Roy at that point was already nudging us, saying, you should write a book. You should write a book. Like, that's a big part of your authority, even if it's a self-published book, like waiting for your adult to bite. And it took us a few years. Dumb New Yorkers sometimes. No one ever said we're smart guys, but we were at a party in New York City, right underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, with our friend Larry Chase, who wrote one of the first internet marketing newsletters. If you remember the Larry Chase and all his web resources,
Yes.
it was him and Ralph Wilson were the two early newsletters on the internet. And so we're at Larry's party, and he had beautiful balcony right underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. And we're getting ready to leave that night, going back. We had driven in from Brooklyn. And Larry says, "Hey, don't leave yet. I want to go bring you my $35 business card." We're like, "What?" And so Larry walks out, and he brings one of his books, and he says, "Yeah, this is what it cost me from the publisher." And so that night in the car, Jeffrey and I agreed, we need to produce a book, but we can't afford a $35 business card, so we're going to self-publish a book. And we printed Persuasive Online Copywriting, which became a cult classic. And there are people who've sold signed copies on Amazon for over $1,000.
Wow.
People would dog ear it and highlight it. And it's funny because everything that people are telling people what to do for their writing to do well in LLMs today is all stuff that we spoke about in the book that was written in 2001.
Wow. It's
So
amazing.
the core principles of understanding how humans chunk information and want to process it don't change. It just is. So we published that book. We started selling them and giving those out as often as we can. And at the same time, we had just written an ebook called The Marketer's Common Sense Guide to E-Metric. And this was just a few months after Jim Stern had written his E-Metrics book. But this was a very practical book on how to use web analytics. And this is where the term bounce rate originally showed up. I had worked with my friend Jim Novo at the time, and we had come up with all these metrics and calculators, and we had an Excel spreadsheet that people can use, because all there was back then was log analyzers. And we were invited into the Web Trends offices, which was a big analytics company at the time. They dominated the analyzer market. And they were going to come out with their JavaScript tag. And they wanted us all to be in sync because they wanted to be able to give out our books at their events.
Right.
And so they started giving out printed copies of the Marketer's Common Sense Guide to E-Metrics. They made us change the name to Reject Rate instead of Bounce Rate to work with what they wanted to do.
Right.
Which was fine. But between those two books, by the time we published our next book, Call to Action, and Seth Godin blogged about how our cover was god awful. And part of that is because of Web Trends, because they encouraged us to get the book 3 weeks earlier than we promised it, because they were going to also give it out at events. And so we're like, so we had to rush to come up with a cover, and we kind of mimicked Roy's covers.
Right.
Okay. The style. And Seth wrote in a blog post, "Don't judge a book by its cover." And further down, he said, "Despite the god awful cover, yes, I'll own it." He said, "Drop everything you're doing and buy the books."
And that's what did it for the book, right? That
And
review
that's
by
what did it.
Seth
It became
Godin.
a New York Times bestseller. Even Meerman Scott, in his new rules for marketing, that was just chapter 1 of the book. He told that story on how we did it. We also leveraged a little bit of transactional stuff there, because what we did is, because it was self-published, we were able to offer, if you bought 1 copy of the book directly from us, we sent you 3. Right? So it was a bargain.
Wow.
Okay. And these are hardcover books, like big books.
Yeah.
Because guess what happens when you send someone 3 books?
You give it away. Those people give away the copies.
You give them away the copies.
Yeah.
And that just mushroomed, and that exploded the industry.
That was like your version of Hotmail putting, want an email address, go to Hotmail or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. And then so those terms, bounce rate and CRO and persuasion architecture and what else? Dent, which
Personas.
personas.
Yeah. I mean, there was a book on personas that came out. I mean, we were talking about the concepts we were doing from our first book, Persuasive Online Copywriting. But there's a book that came out just as we started using some of the personas, because we saw it was starting to be used, and we were researching more about the concept of personas. And what a persona actually is, that the actual term means like the mask from Greek theater. And that's the way we used our personas, right? The book, The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, talked about it for software development and how they do it for user functional roles. But for us, it was about understanding the psychological profile of the person approaching it. So understanding psychological benefits, psychological motivation, decision-making processes, and understanding that people can have one mask for one thing and then change a mask for another thing, but also be in one mask when they first encounter a company, but as they go through the process, they can put on a different mask. And so while other people started using that term persona for user-centered design, it was more functionally based. We just kind of used it more to understand, to do it from a persuasion point of view and turn those personas into narratives using screenwriting techniques so that we could plan what interactions would actually look like.
Yeah. And so that's amazing. So let's change a little bit and then talk about how you guys did content marketing, because I think you guys kind of followed in Roy's footsteps. You were doing an email newsletter, even before there was such thing as a MailChimp or Aweber.
Well, funny thing is, MailChimp was a client twice during our Future Now days, but many, many years into it. Yeah, our first newsletter, I published as hard HTML. And then eventually I built my own email spooler, and I'd watch as those first emails went out. And I remember the first time we had names on there that I didn't recognize and how excited we were. And all of a sudden we started seeing like people from Land's End and people from AOL Corporate and like all kinds of different companies, Dell. And we're like, okay, we're making a difference. And I would literally watch each email go out because I wrote the code to be able to see, the server send it out one at a time, and it would take forever. And then eventually, one of our friends opened up an early ESP, and we used them. But by that point, we had, 30,000 subscribers.
Geez, today people, take forever to get to that level, and you guys were able to achieve that. How long did it take you all to reach that level?
It was a few years. We'd gotten to the point where we had over 40,000 subscribers to the grok.com newsletter. And we deleted them all. We told everybody we're going to subscribe you. And then we got back up to 40,000 within a year.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
So,
yeah.
Just a level of engagement, because there was nobody putting out the kind of content we were at the time.
And you were putting out what, educational content, or what were you?
educational content. We had courses, we were writing articles. I mean, one of my earliest articles, and again, only if you're an OG will you remember this, but when you used to go shopping online, the very early days, and I'm talking about mid to late 90s, you'd go and you'd add something to your cart, and then the only thing you could do was check out. There was no return to shopping button. And we wrote an article about how silly that was, because it was like going to the supermarket, grabbing an item off the shelf, putting it in your cart and just staring at it and not knowing what to do next, right? Yeah, I mean, we would teach people little techniques about what we call point of action assurances.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Austin allergies have been killing me all day.
They're terrible.
On Amazon's website, the very early add to cart button, underneath the add to cart, it used to have the words, "You can always remove this later." And we used to tell people, always have that kind of reaffirming message next to your buttons. And, and same thing with in your checkout, you can reassure them about how fast shipping, what your returns were. And we would teach people that those techniques you could use to improve conversion rates. Right. And so, like, for Cafe Press, for example, we talked about how we improved their checkout process, which only had a 35% abandonment when all the rest of the world averaged like 70%. And using these same principles that we were sharing with everybody, we were able to bring it down to 15%. So we're telling people, just copy what we're doing, test what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys were the earliest practitioners, I think, of conversion rate optimization.
Earliest ones that I know of. Yep.
Yeah. That's amazing. And, and I don't know how many of the brash new up and coming digital marketers here in the Austin area realize that we have two national treasures living here in the Austin area, you and Jeffrey Eisenberg. I don't mean to embarrass you, but it's like, come on, guys, you wouldn't have a job doing what you did if it wasn't for you and Jeffrey.
I think there's more to that as well. And, and especially today, when you think about where we are with AI, right? It's so much easier to gather information. Everyone thinks they know things because of how fast you can get information today from AI. But the most powerful techniques and lessons are stuff I learned 25, 30 years ago that still hold true today. Okay. That isn't necessarily found inside the AIs. The AIs could not come up with viral genius.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it. We tried.
Yeah.
And I think when you don't take the time to go back and read like the staples of Persuasion, Robert Cialdini's books, the early copywriter books, like, tested advertising. Like, there's such genius in those books.
Yeah.
Okay. When we didn't have the tools, when we didn't have, the stuff that we have to, like today, you can have an AI create all the variations of a test you want, but only if you understand all the principles behind the prompts to get how to pull those levers to have success. And that's all the stuff that's in these books behind me and many other that I've read over the years.
Yeah. It's I think it's the principle of, the best person to be able to use AI for marketing is a marketer, and the best person to use vibe coding is a developer. Like, I mean, I know some marketing people who are building applications with vibe coding, but it's taken them a lot longer. And, they might as well have hired a custom software development firm. But I know a custom software development firm who's using vibe coding, and they see this as like, this is amazing because we know the ins and outs of this. We know when it's giving you bad code and when it's giving you good code.
Yeah, I mean, we heard that from Satya Nadella from Microsoft, right? I think that he said like 50% of their code or something like that is all coming from vibe coding today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But it's the brilliant engineers. Look, it's the same way. There's an old expression that if you put enough monkeys behind typewriters, you'll eventually recreate Shakespeare. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think AI is going to recreate the next Shakespeare, but give someone with the talent and knowledge of a Shakespeare the AI tools. And it's the same way. I think I swallowed an elephant. Took me 10 days to write the first draft because I've written so many other books, but it took me 5 months of polishing to get it where it's as impactful as it is today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So the one last thing I wanted to ask you is, with everything that you have done in marketing, and then now, you're seeing this new generation using AI for marketing. Who and I don't mean who by like names, but like new in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Who are the ones who are like going to be successful using AI for marketing?
I was asked on a podcast recently. Actually, it started off as a CRO podcast, which was interesting. And he had asked me, what's the common thread behind everything that I've ever done in my career? Because I'm a former social worker. I was a teacher before that, going back to when I was in college. I taught in private schools. Now I'm very active in a local business. My wife and I own a home care agency. I'm still doing, a little consulting, a little advising to some startups like Rocketbeat and Newsworthy and stuff like that. And he asked me, he said, what's the common thread? And he asked me what any great podcast host is really good at doing, asking that question that makes that guest pause and think about it. Because I didn't have an answer off the top of my list. And then it clicked. And it's something that we looked for when we hired. And it's something that we looked for in our clients as well. If they had it, we knew we had more of a chance for success. Two very, very simple words: curiosity. You want to have to dig in. You want to really understand why people do the things they do. No matter what the technology, no matter what time it is, no matter where they are in their life, you got to be curious. Okay. You're going to learn more. You're going to have so many more opportunities, and you're going to go beyond your little world and expand it into all kinds of areas. And you're going to learn things from the arts and from screenwriting that are going to impact your business. And secondly, which is what I answered to him, was empathy.
I was going to say
Great marketers need to step into their customers' shoes. A quote I wrote 20 plus years ago: our jobs as marketers is to understand how people want to buy and help them to do so. That's empathy. It's about understanding their world, because no one cares about you. You think about your business all the time. You're lucky if they spend 10 minutes looking into your business. They just want you to be a part of the story that they're living, intersecting in their story world and accomplishing what they want to achieve. And if you think ever it's about you, and I'll wrap with one story. So as you mentioned at the very beginning, I'm getting ready to do a workshop here in Round Rock for some of the Round Rock Chamber members. And a friend of mine is putting together an ad, okay, for the Round Rock publication with all the businesses in the chamber. And she showed me the ad, and I was like, okay, this is wonderful. And then finally last night, I got a chance to read the ad. And I texted a friend of mine. I said, friends don't let friends wee all over themselves. Okay. I used to have the number one wee on the web.
Yeah.
Seth Godin talked about playing with my wee. Okay. I had built a calculator, and I'm sure you used my wee calculator way back in the day.
Yeah.
Right. It measured how many times we talked about ourselves versus talked about our customers. And she was talking all about, why she's the best, why she's the one you'd want to work with, blah, 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 blah. So I went ahead and I rewrote what she had, but from a different storytelling perspective, just so it's more the customers. It's not the final product. I just wanted her to understand that change of perspective and how powerful it is, even if we say the exact same thing. Now, I'm expecting she's gonna be at the workshop. I'm gonna run her through a couple of the other key exercises, stuff that I talk about, in the book. I think I swallowed an elephant. And from there, we are going to be able to take out some brandable chunks that we're going to be able to put into this ad that is going to strike at the heart of everybody who would be her potential customer. And that is when you succeed.
And I want to just close with this: brandable chunks. You mentioned that, but I didn't want you to leave without you explain. Brandable chunks are those terms. Like when people came up to me after my speech, they wanted to be able to coin terms that people use in the industry. That's what it is. Brandable chunks, right?
It's using the words that you want your customers to use in their word of mouth. You have to say them in a unique way that's so different, but it's impactful, that they want to keep using it. And so I guess I could tease you here. I don't know when the podcast is going to come out, but we're experimenting a new one with my friend Dr. Mont Delgado from Life Spring Chiropractic. just something he's been playing around with customers the last few days. And it came from a conversation we were having together. And an article that was actually Jeffrey shared with me as well. So it triggered it immediately. And there's a great predictor for people's pain levels and people's longevity and health. Okay. Now, I don't know if you notice, I'm on my standing desk purposely, right? Because I understand the power of AQ. Do you know what AQ is?
AQ is, it's kind of like IQ, but it's...
You've heard of IQ, you've heard of EQ, right? Emotional quotient, intelligent quotient, IQ, and you might have to bleep this out. It's ass quotient. How many hours a day are you sitting on your bleep, bleep, bleep? That's it. And he's telling that to clients. They're repeating it to other people. They've never heard it anywhere else. And it's just landing. And they're like, yeah, I do that so much. So now every single time they think about that, and it's just one of those clicky terms like viral genius, you know what? I know when we're off this podcast, you're going to get up off your, you know what, and get out no matter how hot it is in Texas, because you want your AQ quotient to go down.
I don't think I'll be able to stop thinking about this now. What's my AQ quotient right now? Yeah, brandable chunks. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Brian, thank you so much for your time on this call. And, I think people can find you on LinkedIn through Brian Eisenberg with a Y, and, through all of their, books. Go out and buy. I think I swallowed an elephant. The stories we sell, the success we build. There we go. And all their other books. I think the most recent books are the Rice and Beans Millionaire and Be Like Amazon. But they wrote Persuasive Online Copywriting and, Teaching Your Cat to Bark and Call to Action and so many other books as well. So thanks a lot, Brian. And we will see each other next time.
We'll have to go meet back at the coffee shop for the next brilliant moment.
Exactly.
Take it
Bye-bye. If you want to get more of the Viral Genius podcast in your inbox, just go to startupstrikes.substack.com and subscribe.